Right, hello everybody. We've got Teri Thomas with us today of Beyond Co, and we're going to be talking a little bit about your business. You can tell us all about it in a moment, and really kind of what your plans are, that kind of stuff, and then really deep dive into kind of maybe some of those hurdles that you might have in achieving those plans over a longer period of time. So sort of standard podcast type stuff. So yeah, tell me a little bit about your business and kind of what you do in a sort of elongated pitch, if you like. You can have more than your standard local chamber.
My elevator
60.
pitch.
Yeah, you can have imagine we're going up the Eiffel Tower.
Okay, fab. All right, I will do my best. So at Beyond Co, we build authentic brands that are based on trust, commanding attention, and also acceleration of results. So essentially, the way that I've structured the business is that we have a personal branding arm of the business. We do general brand building for businesses. And then I'm also currently trying to build out a education and training arm of the business, which is something we can come on to a bit later in the podcast. But essentially, what we're trying to do is educate senior leaders, business founders on the importance of personal brand and why they should be using themselves as an asset within their marketing mix, but also really trying to get people to understand that personal branding is a revenue driver. And if you're doing it right, it should help you to achieve a lot more business growth than your traditional channels.
Okay, so we're kind of in the personal branding space, essentially, of various natures, and your kind of ideal clientele is your sort of chief executive, CEO type people, or you're working kind of more at the lower end, like kind of sub 50 and less employee type business owner, or bigger than that?
So I've got a bit of a mixture of clients, and I have kind of like different client personas, as most people obviously do within their business. So I'm finding that at the moment, a lot of people are coming to me that maybe have previously had corporate careers and are now looking to do something new. And they obviously want some help to support the branding of their business, because they are now their business, but also helping them to position themselves as an authority in their space in order to help them to drive revenue at the early stages of that business. Then I have other people that are pretty established in their careers, and they're working within businesses but have aspirations to transcend the lofty heights of senior leadership. And they might need help to kind of really help them to promote themselves internally and what their presence is externally.
Right.
And then I have other business leaders and founders who are more established, but they might still be in kind of startup stage. So I'm working with some venture capital funds. I'm also working with some of their clients. So essentially how they market themselves to drive funding. And then also from an exit perspective, how they then drum up more trade and interest, essentially, in order for them to get the best ticket price for their business on exit. So it's a bit of a mixture, to be honest. And we like to think that we're able to support, obviously, each of those different stages with what we put together.
And the kind of work that you're doing is more kind of holistic building of a brand, personal brand with that person, or are you doing the kind of back office support? So I'm thinking like steering the person in the right direction, like you're going to help them find what their personal brand is and then kind of run with that, essentially, or are you offering the support as well, like as in setting them up on the social media channels and making sure that stuff gets there, filming them, all that kind of stuff? Because there's obviously the two kind of different ends of that scale. Is it a full service, or is it? Yeah,
so it's been set up to be full service. So essentially the business, I run the business, and people are buying into me in terms of like who they're working with and what I can offer from a strategy perspective. Just to be clear as well, we specialise in personal brand, but my experience is in brand building more holistically. So when I talk about brand building for businesses, I find that it is most powerful when it is intrinsically linked. But my sort of passion, I guess, is that personal branding piece. And again, we can talk about that a bit more as we move through the podcast. But in terms of your question around full service, the reason that we named the business, or I named the business Beyond Co, is I have aspirations to scale. And ultimately I'd like to bring specialists in-house.
Yeah.
So I might have web design capabilities or social media management capabilities. But at the moment, I lean on a trusted network of partners. So there will be things that I do myself to support the client. But for example, if we need an amazing videographer or amazing photographer, I work as a partnership model to bring those people to the client. Okay. So they only work with me as their interface, but we have trusted experts and partners that support that journey for us.
Yeah, okay. So for the audience, I suppose, to dumb it down, not like you're talking to me like a 5-year-old, but a good example would be, say, somebody like Richard Branson, who is Richard Branson, the brand, but he also is Virgin, as in, like, you might call him Mr. Virgin. So you're kind of combining those two things simultaneously, if you like his personal brand, like as a person, he writes his own books and stuff like that, but he is also most well known as being the head and founder of Virgin, really, isn't it? And various things.
That is exactly it, and that's a really great example, actually, because if you look at Virgin's brand presence versus Richard Branson's, you know, I'm not sure what the latest stats are, but Virgin may have, you know, a few 100,000 followers, but Richard Branson, as his own personal brand and his own entity, has millions of followers and connections on LinkedIn, Instagram, etc., etc. And to your point, Matt, you know, when you think of Virgin, you think of Richard, and he is the face of that brand. Yeah. So ultimately, we're trying to create on a smaller scale at times, but obviously the aspiration,
many Richards,
you know, many Richards going forward. You know, it's people like Stephen Bartlett. Stephen Bartlett has a whole host of brands that he manages. And for those of you that haven't listened to Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO podcast, you've probably heard of it. It is amazing. If you listen to that and you hear about some of the ventures that he's dipping his toes into, like I think he's recently created an athleisure brand. You know, no one knows the name of that brand. I literally couldn't recall it to you. But what I do know is that Stephen is an amazing business owner.
Yeah, he's involved with it.
And he's involved in it, exactly. You know, he's a dragon on Dragon's Den. He's, you know, 32, 33 years old. And absolutely gunning it from a millionaire standpoint because it's him that everybody's bought into, not necessarily his business ventures.
Okay. So Beyond Co, what's the co part of it?
So the co part of it is the ecosystem that supports it and us. Yeah. So one of my kind of opportunities and challenges that I wanted to get your advice on, actually, was around the scalability of the business and how you marry aspirations with where you are currently. And, you know, we've got a lot of fantastic coaches in our community that I've also spoken to about this. But ultimately, the goal in the end will be that we have either an account director, account management model that supports a broader range of clients at varying different stages of those audience personas that I mentioned previously, and or subject matter experts. You know, your colleague Luke and I were talking about this as we came into the room today, you know, specialists in and around media management, crisis management, PR, all of the things that I've learned throughout my career, but that obviously would set me quite thin from a client delivery standpoint if I continue to do all of those things for each of the clients I'm hoping to onboard. So the co has been structured at the moment to be like more of a kind of freelance partnership model with trusted partners and advocates that I work with. But going forwards, it will hopefully be, you know, a office model of lots of fantastic employees that love working at Beyond Co.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, well, we'll come on to some of those bits a bit later on. But in terms of the actual business itself, how long has it been going for?
So I was really fortunate to start the business early this year with my first client before I was necessarily ready to go.
Okay. Sometimes that's always the best way, isn't it?
I know. It was really advantageous, but I had to be like very honest with her. And luckily it was a relationship that I'd had for a really long time. She's my previous mentor at JP Morgan, and she's recently become the CEO of a hedge fund in Australia. So we're working together, and I did quite a big project for her, and we're now working on a more retained basis now that project's over. But it was really interesting because I sort of officially launched the business at the end of March, beginning of April, so it's obviously very new. But having that first client and being like, I literally don't have terms and conditions yet. I'm trying to work out how to invoice.
ChatGPT that.
Yeah, I know, exactly, right? And make ChatGPT. So I was like, what are the 10 documents I need when I'm first starting a business?
Yeah.
And obviously leaning into networks and things around like, how do I set this up? Who do I speak to?
Yeah.
And I was really fortunate that I had a great network of people both in Australia, where I've been living for the last 9 years, but also relationships that I have continued to cultivate here in England. So I basically was just borrowing and stealing everybody's advice around what I needed to look out for and how I needed to do stuff.
And what were you doing at JP?
So
Was that a similar sort of thing? Or?
Yeah, so I had worked for JP Morgan for nearly 9 years. And basically, I led communications and marketing for several areas of their business in and around Australia and New Zealand. I also worked on some of the projects in APAC as well, which was fantastic from a cultural nuance perspective. Obviously, that was a real learning curve for me, having started my career in London, moved to Sydney, and then working on projects based out of Asia. And essentially what I did there is I worked on all areas of the marketing and communications spectrum. So I was doing anything from internal communications, went through COVID during that time as well, like all of the communications that were going out to clients, crisis management, media monitoring, media engagement, the creation of campaigns, research projects, utilising our channel specialists in more of the hub locations around paid and organic social media, online marketing, in-person events and activities. I'd be writing speech notes 1 minute and, presenting on the latest research project the next. So it was great because, and again, I was saying to Luke before, it really gave me a great understanding of all of the different areas within the business that marketing and communications touches. Yeah. And it ended up with me being a member of the management team for a lot of those senior leaders, working with them on not only their internal engagement, but also their external capabilities and persona, which is really the gap that I identified as I looked to build Beyond Co.
Okay. So in terms of your kind of day-to-day job, if you like, what's that kind of look like or entail for you? Because it's you on your own at the moment. I know you had an intern or something.
I had an intern last week. Yeah.
So primarily yourself. Probably, I'm guessing on the other side of this form, it's like looking to grow, and we've touched on those sort of things. So what do you do with yourself what's a typical day look like, or a typical week for you? Yeah, okay. It's a great question, Matt. It's very varied at the moment. What are you doing with your time?
As I'm sure you can appreciate, anybody else that's kind of starting their business will know this too. So I always talk about, I have 2 jobs. So I'm the mum of a very beautiful 2.5-year-old. I still call him my baby / tiny human, but he's not so tiny anymore. So typically I kind of start my day trying to really have some intentional time with him. And I talk about intention because I think, as all parents know, and I know that you have kids too, it can really feel like a pull and a juggle at times. And, a lot of the female founders that I follow talk about this a lot in terms of how they make up their day. But what I really try to do is have those first hour or 2 with Teddy, my son. I respond to kind of what needs to be responded to overnight. I mentioned before I've got an Aussie-based client, so obviously she's kind of at the end of her day as I'm starting my day. So we kind of exchange a few messages early doors, and I respond to anything immediately urgent over email. Spend that time with Teddy. My husband and I do a mixture of drop-offs to nursery. And then I go to the office. And what I was finding initially is I was trying to work from home, obviously keeping costs down, working from the dining table. Yeah. And I'm quite particular about the ways that I work, and I like to be quite organised. I love stationery. I like to have all my folders laid out and know how I'm going to organise my day. Yeah. So that kind of packing up and restarting each day just wasn't really working for me. Yeah. So I'm actually borrowing a space at a local business at the moment who've kindly let me utilise some underutilised office space in their building. And I essentially go there, I'll work my way through my inbox, primarily first thing, and then I try to block out some time for the real deep thinking work. So that's a real mixture at the moment of client delivery, obviously prospecting. So when I'm thinking about prospecting, building out my pitch deck, I'm making updates to my website, I'm generating content for myself to build my own personal brand. thinking about key takeaways that people can immediately, embed within their businesses that isn't going to take them long. And then I'm, doing the networking circuit. And I think that we're really spoiled in Brighton and Hove to have some really fantastic events run by some really fantastic business leaders that really genuinely want the best out of the community and the experience for the community around business ownership and entrepreneurship. And then, the kind of final element of that will really be, spending one-on-one time with people, understanding about their businesses, if they've got challenges around how they position themselves, their visibility, if there's ways that I can work with them on that. And then, the last and final portion, which I sometimes drag my heels on a little bit, to be honest, is more of the system processes, all of those things around making sure that you've got a great client experience as you look to onboard. I mentioned earlier about finding the right documents, your invoicing, your accounting, your cash flow, what's going on with all of those things. So, it's at the moment, to be honest, it is a huge mix of activity. And then most evenings I spend creating content, which none of us should underestimate how long that can take.
It does take a long time.
And as someone that creates content on behalf of other people, I really do understand that it is time consuming, especially if you've got a real strategy that you want to stick to and you want to be very focused on the messages you're sharing. And I try to do that more of an evening as I'm kind of rounding out my day.
Yeah. So what do you do to kind of capture those clients that you're after? Because you're a perfect kind of avatar of a client, if you like. I know a lot of this very in vogue thing to say, the avatar is probably someone who's like been put into that position, or you're trying to grow that. What do you do to, like, what's your strategy, I suppose, to go and get those clients, like from a business development point of view? You go and, like, obviously a lot of those people will exist in London, that kind of stuff. Are you spreading yourself about, or what's the kind of take on that?
What's the mix?
Yeah.
So I've developed a proprietary framework in order to support those clients. So we can talk about that a little bit more in terms of how I actually do that for them. In terms of actually meeting clients and prospects at the moment.
Getting new business, I suppose.
Yeah.
Like a proportion of your day is dedicated to growing the business, isn't it? Like what does that look like?
I would say I spend around a third to a half of my day currently prospecting for new business. And because there really is a scale in terms of what that support looks like for various different audiences and business owners, it could be something as simple as, arranging a new photo shoot and updating somebody's LinkedIn, right through to kind of a whole brand audit strategy matrix for a client that knows that their competition may be overtaking them slightly in terms of their visibility and thought leadership. So when I look to prospect, typically what I'm doing is I'm posting regularly on my own channels. So I'm walking the talk and really making sure that I'm sharing content, not only from a self-promotion perspective, but from a value creation standpoint. What quick tips and tricks, quick fixes, what I've learned from various different things, obviously, as my own business owner, my own business journey, and how I implement that, spend the day with me, walk the talk with me, how am I doing this? And then I'm also creating my own content, which I'm sharing on my website and via socials. And video, obviously, is becoming increasingly important. I've been utilising that a fair bit. And then from a networking standpoint, ultimately, people buy into people, and I'm very aware of that. I have spent a lot of my career being perceived as the bubbly blonde girl who works in marketing. And obviously that is absolutely me. You can spend a little bit of time with me, I'm quite a gregarious character. But ultimately, I think it's really important that you demonstrate that commercial side of yourself and you showcase to people how they can really commoditize their personal brand to drive and accelerate growth for their business. And there's a real education piece around that at the moment. I think a lot of people think it's about posturing and putting yourself out there. Of course, there's an element to that. But, when I'm talking to prospective clients, I'm still finding that there's, people understand to a degree what it is, but they don't really know how to implement it, or they're worried about how time consuming it can be to implement it. So there's an education as well as a sales side to things as well.
Okay. And do you have like a sort of like a time scale or a kind of mapped out journey of how you want to achieve all of that? You know, kind of at certain points you might need someone to come in and do those processes for you and those things that you don't like outsource those bits or whatever. And a certain volume of clients or whatever, because eventually you get to the point where you're too busy and then you're going to need to make a decision. You have to employ someone. Do you have that mapped out, as in what that person is that you want to employ at that moment in time, or what they're going to do? Because if you fast forward like 10, 15 years, you've become the brand of your own business. You are that person. And then you've got a shed load of employees, like mini versions of you going out and doing what you're doing now, and then a support team below them. So it's like a pyramid, if you like, with you at the top of it. Do you have it mapped out how you think you might get to that stage?
Yeah, I think there's a few things, and some of my points might seem like I'm veering away from your question, but they are.
Right.
They are.
It's like almost having like a KPI. Like I get to X, Y, Z. That means I would employ a bookkeeper. I get to da da da. You know, do you have that sort of thing?
Yeah, definitely. And I've got a great support network around me. I'm already working with an accountant who's incredibly savvy. My dad spent his entire career in bookkeeping, moving up to kind of financial directorship at a local construction company. So I've got some great people around me that are helping me with the numbers. In terms of responding to your question around bringing on staff, or people that work with me, I hate the word staff. Or like a team of people, or like supporting members. Look, being completely honest with you, I think I need to kind of build out, 2 or 3 more retained clients. So I have a steady stream of income. And then at that point, I probably will look to having someone potentially like a virtual assistant to help me with more of the administrative sides of the business. I already work with a fantastic social media marketing manager who actually has a full-time gig currently, working for a retail brand, but we've had a relationship for a really long time, and she does some freelancing for me, which actually takes some of the heavy lifting out of content creation for me, so that I can focus on doing it for clients. So I think at the moment, really, to answer your question, the sort of satellite ecosystem model of trusted partners will remain maybe for the next 3 to 6 months, and then it will be bringing people on in a part-time capacity to help me with more of the administrative side of the business, so that I can really focus on client engagement and client delivery. I've also got a bit of a secret weapon at the moment. My husband's between jobs, and he has been the commercial director of several financial publications when we lived in and around Australia. So he's helping me a lot at the moment with my kind of pitching materials, collateral, really honing in my value proposition and how I respond to those audience segments. Because when you're doing that on behalf of a company and their products and services, that's one thing. But when you're actually doing it and you're the product and service for your clients, it's quite easy to get a bit clouded and sort of have self-bias. So it's been really interesting to work with him, and he's basically like, look, I don't understand what you're telling me here. You're just using loads of marketing jargon, what's the actual tangible outcome for me as your client? I'm not saying it's a foolproof forever plan. I don't think we could work and live together on the long term, but it has been fantastic to learn and borrow from his knowledge. So I'm really borrowing the expertise of trusted people around me at this moment in time.
Yeah, it's quite hard working with your other half.
He's amazing. We just work very differently.
Each other, I'm sure.
I'm like, I love you. I don't want to continue to work with you. I don't want us to be falling out about business. But he's obviously got a real vested interest, right? I've taken a step back from a successful career to start my own business. I'm going to be earning.
Wants you to succeed.
And I'm going to be earning less money for a considerable amount of time until I've built up a client base that will give me a similar salary to what
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
used to. So, you know, he's a shareholder as much as I am.
Yeah.
Just hopefully a more silent one.
Yeah. We'll ask you when we want your
Yeah,
views. Yeah,
exactly.
That sort of job. I suppose I touch on that point of having those KPIs or that stuff, because a lot of people kind of, they go out on this thing and it's all organic and it's not too sure on the growth. And I'm quite a fairly big advocate. I think you touched upon it about some of the clients that you worked with, they will go on to be like a venture capitalist, and then they invest all their stuff in the money, and then they've got their exit strategy at some point, because they're always thinking about the end goal.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I say, if you started with the end in mind, what does the end look like? Like, when's it done for you? And then kind of work backwards, like your journey of how you get to the end. So I don't know if maybe I rephrased the question. What does the end look like for you, and how are you going to, and then we can explore how we're going to get there.
Yeah, look, for me, this is a real passion project.
Just to be clear, the end doesn't have to be you selling it.
Yeah, I was going to say, like,
the end could be
I'm
like,
not quite there yet, Matt. I've got a few more working years ahead of me.
The end could just be like, I'm happy with where it is. I've got my systems back, and the end is I now don't really need to work. I'm literally just the face of my business. It's completely automated and run by a whole load of people, and I'm the biggest shareholder. That could be the end for you.
Yeah, and look, I think a lot of people, you know, enjoy that side of things. Like, I've met some great people on the networking circuit, for example, who are exactly at that stage. You know, they've got incredibly successful businesses. They are the face and brand of their businesses, and they essentially spend a lot of time out in market creating opportunities for their business, and that is their role as CEO and founder, and they really enjoy that and thrive in that space. It's very easy for me as a new business owner to say that I want to continue to do some of the doing. And we can obviously revisit this in 5-10 years' time when you've got thousands and thousands of podcast subscribers, Matt, and hopefully I've got a bigger business set up. But look, I don't think that I will ever not have my own clients. My ideal end state will be that I will have a boutique agency that supports the aspirations of business leaders, founders, and their supporting leadership teams and businesses for many years to come. Ultimately, where I'd like to get to is I maybe have a handful of clients that I work with directly in a kind of account directorship capacity, and then they have more day-to-day management and support from people within my team. And I, you know, have built my personal brand to a point that, you know, I'm being invited on podcasts or invited to speak as an authority in this space. And for many, many years, I was quite shy about sharing that aspiration. You know, you work in a big bureaucratic organisation for long enough, and, you know, you're told that you need to be the team player and, you know, work with people, and that's great. And, you know, I'm very much a team player, and I like to think a good partner. But I have aspirations for myself, and I'm very proud to share them as a new business owner, that is ultimately where I'd like to get to. But I appreciate, as much as I want that to happen right now, that's going to take some time before I get there.
So the kind of 10-year time goal, I suppose, is to be in a position where it's a boutique sized firm, maybe sub 12 employees, something like that, or
maybe a bit bigger. Maybe boutique bigger. In my mind is like sub 50.
Sub 50, okay. So we're not talking like a massive powerhouse, like a big American rebranding type advertising model. Just that kind of like sub 50 employees, that sort of size business where you can then be the advocate, founder, look for you know, ways of expanding the business, that kind of stuff. As that's the kind of end goal, if you like. So it's about the journey of how to kind of get there, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, you talk a lot about subcontractors and the trusted network of suppliers and the rest of it. As time goes by, obviously you are going to need to employ some people and have them in-house and the rest of it, because those agreements with people are really good, especially when you're small and they're flexible and you can dispose of people, well, not dispose of them, like chop them off, but as in if you don't require them, then they're self-employed essentially.
Yeah.
But you need that kind of stability. Also, clients look at what you've got as well, and they'll say, right, how many people do you employ? And they can look all that up on Companies House as well and things like that. So that kind of stability will give your brand or your business a bit of a kudos in this space, really, that it isn't just built up of a network of kind of freelancers, if you like. It's okay to bring freelancers in, but I think like your bigger businesses do look for that kind of stability, if you like.
Yeah, and I think, to be clear, the subcontracting component of the business is for execution only.
Yeah.
So in terms of the strategy and building out that strategy, people are buying into Beyond & Co and they're buying into me. That's what I deliver to them. So I would work with a client on their strategy, how we create that strategy, what messages are core to that strategy, what your content pillars are, what that content strategy looks like, how we build that out. They may already have people that are in-house that can, create content for them to deliver on social media. So it would be about educating those people and working with those people around what the new vision is and how they can become brand ambassadors. So to be very clear, that's what people are buying. In terms of actually deploying and delivering that strategy, there will be things that I will do, like copyright, strategize. I can support on media training, media planning, journalists, meetups, etc., as part of what I deliver at Beyond & Co. But like I said previously, videography, photography, if you want a whiz-bang campaign full of reels, I might lean on somebody that's more retail focused in that space. But ultimately, the actual strategy and the commercialization of you and your business brand still sits very much with me when you work with me.
So when you've got Teri at the top, and then you've got an army of Teris doing your job, because
hopefully not a complete army of Teris, but I get your drift. The people that have worked within the model.
Yeah, because you're going to sit at the top, and you're looking for new ventures. You're being the brand and the face, and you're very much you're the Richard Branson at this moment in time. Except for Richard Branson doesn't know how to operate a bank. And yet he owned a bank for a while. He also doesn't know how to fly a plane or make Coca-Cola, but he's done all of those things.
He has.
Because he needs that thing and that bleeding that ethos down. So how do you feel you will tackle the kind of having an army, or even if it's a small army, just trusted associates below you, the employees, if you like, at that level, a mini army of Teris, essentially, because they've got to have your energy and your ethos and the rest of it. And what say you to that?
I think it's a really good question. It's a question that I thought about a lot. I've dreamed about having my own business since I was very young. And now, it's coming to fruition, and I don't take that lightly. And, I have a responsibility to my family, have a responsibility to my partners currently, and I will have responsibility ultimately to the people that work with me. And I mentioned this phrase earlier, and I will keep mentioning it, but, people really do buy into people. And I think the most compelling asset of any business is the people that work within it. And when I talk to the CEOs and founders that I work with, one of their most underutilized channels within their businesses are their people and the sort of brand ambassadors and advocates that they can build within in order for you to disseminate messages that your business wants to share with your clients and customers. To use an example, and I hope she doesn't mind, the only reason that I'm on this podcast is because I sat next to Hayley at a recent Barrow Club event, and I'm name dropping, so hopefully Paul Britton enjoys that. But I sat next to Hayley and we chatted, and we were just talking generically about, various different kinds of work, and she was like, you should apply, you'd be great on the podcast. And it's only because I'm, as you mentioned, passionately advocating for my business and talking about it, hopefully with a lot of energy and enthusiasm. But when we talk about kind of the team of Teris, I'm also very mindful that my enthusiasm in some settings isn't how you're going to get the best out of a certain leader or founder. I work with a lot of people that work in the technology space. They don't typically like to be around a lot of people or sort of sales and marketing people. And you obviously adapt to how you discuss what you can provide for them differently. And I hope that my kind of team of people is a real mix of people that brings out the best in their clients. So, you might have the silent assassin, if you will. And I've worked with plenty of those, the people that don't say anything all meeting and then come out with the golden nugget at the end, or the people that quite overtly say, look, I'm sorry, I'm not comfortable with that. That's not actually how I want to go about this. And you need to have a real mix of point of views and perspectives. So I hope that my team actually isn't a team of Teris. Yeah. They're just bought into Teri's vision.
Yeah, I don't mean a team necessarily replicas of you. I meant as in they see your vision and they believe in your mission and your core values and your state. Because it's one of the hardest things as you grow as a business. Taking staff and getting them to kind of be like, you cut them in half and they've got Beyond Co written in the middle of them, you know, and whatever that's defined by you, that is a fairly difficult thing to scale. There's a book called Delivering Happiness, which is about Zappos, which is like in the UK we have Shoe. They're an American version of that, but they grew and they were massive. I talked about them before, and I'm sure we can put a link in the description to the book. But it's a really good book about building culture in businesses. I mean, they were like a massive business, but they started small. And literally, the guy that stacks the shoes in the warehouse all the way to like the top sales regional manager to the CEO, they all like, you cut them in half and they had like a Zappos logo in the middle of them. And they had this scheme where they would train people basically, and then they would always be having someone up and coming. So if someone was to leave, then that person was promoted. They tried to always avoid inserting new members of staff. So the very top team, obviously the CEO and all that kind of stuff, and CFO, they changed from time to time as people moved on. But they always made sure that person was kind of still cut from that sort of similar cloth. But your middle management and the kind of workforce, if you like, there was always like apprenticeship. You learn this, you do this, and then you do it the Zappos way, and then you become a line manager. We don't just go out and get a line manager. You've always got a line manager in waiting. As they get bigger as a company, that was easier to maintain because obviously volume of staff and economies there. But at the very beginning, they tried to really do that. And I think it's a really interesting book about kind of making sure that you don't end up with like an army of Teris or Matts, you know, because you don't all want the same. Like, you're like me, I can go to a meeting and I'm very good at putting different hats on for different people. But some people are like, we just don't like your ginger hair, Matt, or we wanted to deal with a woman, or we wanted someone that perhaps, I don't know, talk to us on a more less authoritative level. Like, my voice can come across quite kind of authoritative in a meeting, if you like, and sometimes they don't like that. So it's stuff you can't change, but the passion that is there that I want to portray is that's the bit that you need to install with the staff, isn't it? Or the people that are working for you. And it's harder to install them if they're freelance or whatever, because they've obviously got their own business and their own ethos and the way they want to do their business, and they're not going to kind of necessarily beat the drum of Beyond Co. Yeah,
and I think you're absolutely right, and I think that will be a challenge as I grow, which is one of the challenges I actually wanted to talk to you a bit more about. But I think, essentially, when, like, I had a question actually come through, on, like, I posted on social media. Obviously, I'm trying to walk the talk about the podcast today. And somebody that I have admired for a really long time, actually, who is a coach, she's a female empowerment coach. And she sent me a question which was kind of like, what's the single biggest investment a business can make in terms of their visibility? And that was the response to my question. Invest in your team as your largest brand ambassadors. The amount of people that I meet and have met throughout my career, I've been doing this 15 nearly 20 years if you also count kind of like university placements, et cetera, which I don't like to think about too much. But, the people that empower, like the leaders that empower their teams to talk passionately and authoritatively about their businesses are always the businesses that are most successful. So if a small business is spending time, you mentioned I had an intern last week, by the time I got to the end of the week with Grace last week, she was like, this is what you do, this is how you do it. And it was awesome to talk to her about it, because I was like, great, she's understood what we're trying to deliver here. Yeah. And if you can do that, that's amazing. Marks & Spencer's is one of the best brands at this, or used to be. I haven't worked at Marks & Spencer's since my college and university years, but, there was a whole level of customer assistance. You know, I did customer assisting. I used to sell their credit card. I used to bra fit. I worked on their lingerie department, and there was me and several other friends that used to work there at the weekends and go out during the weekend, and then go back the following day. But all our mums worked there. So, you know, they'd basically cultivated, to your point, their succession plan of customer assistance. And, you know, if someone says to me, like, what did you miss most about like when you lived in Australia, what did you miss most? Obviously, family is number one. But I missed Marks and Spencer's. I missed going and getting like my £6 meal deal and being able to buy like comfy knickers or whatever. So, you know, they do a great job, I think, in this country of creating brand ambassadors, not only the people that work there, but the way that they advertise, the way that they share their thought leadership, the way that their top people speak about a brand that they love and have grown up with. And you can really see the heritage in that brand. You know, so I think that's one of the best case studies for that.
Definitely. I mean, there's lots of businesses are really good at it and lots of businesses not very good at it at all. But I think it's a really key thing in order to grow your business, especially if the business is very circulated around the founder. So, because people are going to feel like, I know what you're about, and then when they meet somebody else, they're going to expect it to be a bit similar. Like we have this problem here where I might go and pitch for a new business or something, and then I hand it over to someone else, and if that person isn't really the way I am and the passion that I've come across of it, sometimes we can get this kind of, oh, well, you know, it's not quite how we thought it was going to be, you know, and that's quite hard, and something that we work fairly hard at to make sure that those people have got the same sort of passion and level as much as you possibly can, because everybody is human underneath.
How do you identify those people? Like when you're going through, because it is one of my challenges, right? As I look to scale. Sorry, you probably
That's all right.
were going on to ask me. I'm asking you a
cover
question.
Your question. So, I mean, for me personally, I do. When I interview, we kind of have a 2-stage interview. So we don't always do it physically in 2 stages. It might be 2 of us in the interview, and what we're looking for is to cover the 2 stages, just because we found that speed is quick now. If we were having 2-stage interviews and people were finding a job in between, so we decided to speed that up. One is core values, and the other one is like a traditional interview, but it's not particularly corporately structured. So I'm getting a feel for the person. Are they likely to stay with us for a period of time? Because they're disruptive if they come in for a year and then go. You know, staff turnover is inevitable but hard to manage. Does that person going to fit with their colleagues? Are they the people that they're going to work with are all introverts and this is an extrovert? That's not going to work very well. And do they really believe in the way we are? You know, we're a very kind of, I suppose the core business here is quite a conservative, you know, right-wing style business, is to do with property and wealth building and all those kind of things, which can come across negative to some people. So we make sure that they all fit in that kind of category, really, and then do I get a good feel for them? Whilst that's going on, you've also got the other person looking and making sure that they tick our core values, which we're quite keen on here, about like we're taking accountability. They're on our website for Charles Cox, but they run across all the firms that we deal with. Do they tick those boxes, essentially? Because if they don't tick those boxes, they're probably not going to be a good fit for us. And someone said to me once, and I loved the phrase, like about, you have to kiss a few frogs before you find your prince.
Yes, you do.
Unfortunately, with employees, probably 1 in 5 won't pan out. And the other 3 will be pretty good, and then 1 will be like a superstar. And then it's about making those kind of B players. Can you make them A players, or are they always going to be B players? And as your business grows, you need some B players anyway, because the ones that are not so go-getting for their career, that just sit in the corner and do a job, and then you need a mixture of the people that want to progress. So at interview stage, we're kind of taking all of that in, and it's really difficult within like a half an hour. Like you come out of that and then you've got bang another one. So you've got to make notes, you've got to do stuff, and then some of it you have to go with your gut a little bit. Like I've come from a corporate background. I was at Halfords, who were owned by Boots when I worked there, and then they sold it to a venture capitalist, and they had a very kind of like, you had to ask these questions, you know, what's your long-term plans? What's your da-da-da? And I'm like, well, some people don't have a long-term. Like, you ask them and they look like a rabbit in the headlights.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
It depends if I get this job or not.
I just had 2 kids and I wanted to get back into the workforce. I wasn't thinking about more than next month's paycheck.
Yeah.
You know? So it's an irrelevant question. So you have to kind of be dynamic in the actual interview. But yeah, I follow the much more kind of holistic-y, kind of softer approach to the interviews. Sometimes that works out all right. I've made horrible mistakes and misjudged people before, but that's back to your kissing frogs and all that jazz.
Yeah. I can be a bit of an over-investor in people, I think. It's definitely some feedback that I've had before. So I can get quite excited about the prospect of somebody. And my mum gives me feedback. Don't mums give the best feedback? My mum said to me once that I really romanticise things at times, you know, so like
what it could be.
Luckily my husband can keep pace, hence why I married him, so that's good. But you know, when I think about the people that I meet or the partnerships that I might create, and I'm in talks with a few different businesses at the moment to create partnered products, which obviously will be help with that kind of that broader ecosystem to be in partnership with other people too. But like working out, to your point, what's a frog and what's a prince and where to put your efforts. And I think all small business owners, it's not necessarily something that I shared with you ahead of time, but where you put your energy. I've had to have some big chats with myself even since launching in like March, April time.
It's incredibly hard if it's not in your nature, but you have to be brutal. If the frog is a frog, then you have to let them go quickly. I have a phrase of it's better to have a hole in your business than an a-hole.
I love that.
Because
I've not heard that one before.
Somebody who is filling a job because you're like, right, I need 8 team members to do this task or this job, and we've only got 7 right now, and you get the 8th person in and they are so negative Nelly or a mood hoover or whatever their problem is, that actually they bring down 3 of the other 7 people. So you're better off not having them and having that hole than having
it's just creating a toxic culture, and everybody, you know, people buy from people, people feed from people. If you don't have that kind of, I call them radiators and drains, similar thing to mood hoover. You know, if you have drains in your organisation, and I've seen this time and time again in the organisations and teams that I've worked with, you know, you're really in trouble if you have to keep that person within your business. And it takes a lot for the other radiators and kind of B players in your business to continue to deliver at a level befitting to them before that drain was there.
Yeah. The negativity and toxicity is really, really easy for it to like penetrate the business. So you have to be willing to cut ties very quickly, and it is hard when you're a good, nice, and I won't want to stereotype, but I would imagine that you letting somebody go would be quite a difficult task for you.
Yeah, I mean, it gives me the heebie-jeebies thinking about it, and I don't even have someone that's on my payroll currently. I know that you've mentioned some of the books that you've read. So Stephen Bartlett and the Diary of the CEO, I discovered a female entrepreneur called Emma Grede, and I'm really fangirling on her at the moment. She has a podcast called Aspire, and she brings out a new podcast every week. And this week's podcast, or not this week's actually, sorry, last week's, I can't remember his surname, but it's a guy with the name Jefferson, and he basically is a communications expert. And he has done like TED Talks. He's worked in huge global organizations as kind of heads of, chiefs. And he's basically talking about how you have difficult conversations and how you fire a frog. And it was really interesting listening to them, because she is a co-founder of Skims and Good American. So like imagine working with the Kardashians, I just can't even imagine. But she has several other business interests. And it was really good to hear that even at that level, firing the frogs and having difficult conversations can still be challenging. And he gave some really great tips. So that would be my, Discovering Happiness is your book. I would say Emma Grede's podcast. They're normally like 45 minutes long. They're a really good listen. I'm hugely crushing on her right now. Yeah, she's like my founder idol.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, it's good to have those things. And I think that people underestimate reading books and listening to podcasts and the rest of it. And I always think that they're really good educational things. I will listen to music in the gym, but often I listen to a podcast or whatever. I like a thing on, completely off topic, but there's a thing called Toast, and it's run by BBC.
I've heard of this.
It's literally, they have like an entrepreneur, like a sort of person that's done very well. I don't know actually what they do, but they're like kind of probably about 5 steps away from being on Dragon's Den, which is probably a million miles away from being on Dragon's Den. But they probably made like 50 million as opposed to like hundreds of million.
Yeah.
So they're well versed in it, but they have them on, and then they basically choose a business that has gone bust or stopped trading or something or other, and they analyse what led up to that. Like Woolworths,
awesome.
For instance.
Yeah.
You probably remember Woolworths in the UK.
I do,
Woolies.
fondly.
Yes.
As a stationery lover.
Yeah.
I used to get my pocket money before school and go in there and update it all. It's not here.
Pick a mix and CDs.
Yeah, my first £10 note, I went in there to buy 3 singles on my 13th birthday.
Yeah.
You don't get that anymore, Matt.
No. Luke might not even know what CDs are. Well, he probably does know what they are, but he definitely...
We're both looking at Luke. He's shaking his head.
He definitely won't remember going in and buying the #1 album. And
or Now 57.
Yeah.
Nostalgia. Sorry.
So they talk about businesses like that, like what led up to that point of view. And I think like they're really good. Like there's quite a sort of negative podcast, I suppose, because it's analysing a business that's gone bust and the rest of it. But it's really interesting because there's often probably only about 8 different reasons fundamentally when you scratch the surface as to why those businesses stop trading. But I find that sort of stuff really fascinating, and it's a good way of educating yourself without kind of dedicating too much time over to it.
Yeah.
Like I hardly ever listen to the radio in the car. I mean, most of the time it's phone calls on the hands-free kit as you're driving along. But in between that, I will choose, especially if there's a fair period of time, I'll choose to listen to a podcast of some nature or try and just educate myself a little bit. And I think that's like really underestimates. Like you take that inspiration, like delivering happiness for me. I was like, oh, that's so good. Like if we ever scaled to that size, or I was involved with a business of that's such a good thing to pull upon. Yeah,
definitely. And I think it's really important to continue to learn. It doesn't matter how like seasoned you are in your career or how good you are or you think you are at something. You know, I've just signed up to a marketing event. It looks like it's probably for, marketing executives and managers. That's what I was doing 10, 15 years ago. But I have no doubt in my mind that if I went to that event and spent the morning there, that I would learn lots of new things about new technologies that I'm not currently utilising. And my husband and I actually now try and have at least one night a week where we don't turn on the television.
Yeah.
So I bought him a record player for Christmas. So we've been scouring the charity shops, and obviously paying full price as well where needed for new vinyl.
Yeah.
But we try and put like a record on some nights, especially on like a Sunday or a Monday when we've got like the paper from the weekend.
Yeah.
And just really try and like get up to speed with politics and what's going on. Because especially when you have a tiny human, I spend a lot of my car journeys with Teddy in the car listening to Tractor Ted or Disney hits, which is great.
Bluey or something.
Yeah.
Got some Bluey maybe.
But I think the podcast thing definitely helps me, especially because I'm used to working in large organisations with teams of people.
Yeah.
And now I'm working on my own in a borrowed office.
Yeah.
It's not quite as glamorous. And sometimes I don't talk to many people in a day, which you can probably tell for me is strange.
Can't it?
Yeah. So it's good to have the podcast, I think. Keep sending the recommendations, Matt.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. So I just want to move on to your questions that you've got here about the kind of your plans, just to make sure we've covered everything. And I know you've got some questions of your own as well. So year 1, you've got grow the client base, launch a digital evergreen product for personal brand clarity, continue to raise visibility for myself and the business through speaking and podcasting and partnerships. Build a specialist team. So your 3 to 5 year goals would be build a specialist team to deliver a strategy and content, become a go-to voice in personal branding, strategy for senior leaders, create frameworks and tools and scale beyond one-to-one. So I think we've talked about obviously delivering, like kind of making sure you've got that end in mind and then work backwards from there and make sure that you've got that kind of ethos running through the business and the rest of it so that you can actually kind kind of scale that and reach that sort of goal or work towards that. I think that's sort of what we talked about there. And then the longer term thing was to advise boards and mentor emerging founders and senior leaders, having an exciting, invaluable book of clients that love working with us, globally recognised in the leadership space. So that's your kind of end in mind. So I think across that like kind of plan, I always say to people, people underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years and overestimate what they can achieve in a year.
Yeah.
So yeah, starting with the end in mind as a recap is probably a good place, and making sure the army of Teris, as we describe them, it's easier to get them to be, when you cut them through like a stick of rock, they've got Beyond Co written in the middle.
Yeah.
And they sing your ethos, if you like, easier if they're like employed, and you can mould them a little bit and maybe train them up into that. So those are the kind of models that I would sort of say you want to kind of aim for, and just make sure you've got that really clear 10-year goal or the end in mind, and there's some key KPIs like by year 3 I want to have achieved XYZ, I need these clients, and then that kind of helps you focus and see whether or not you're hitting those targets.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people go, KPIs, they get missed and all the rest of it, but I think they are quite key, no pun intended,
Yeah.
in order for you to be able to monitor if you're actually succeeding and heading in the right direction, really.
Yeah.
And it will be probably, most business, a very S-curve of growth, like it will take a long time and then it will suddenly rocket off. So those processes that you referred to earlier, that is not your fond thing to do, that's where you might say I'm better off getting like obviously I have a Hayley here, a PA to me, she does a lot of processes and keep me in track. There's some stuff we were lacking as a business as we grew, so it's important to make sure those things are in place. So some of the challenges that you think you're going to come across there is articulating the return on investment, balancing quality and scale, and cutting through some of the noise and building a business that stands out. So with the articulating the ROI, obviously I know marketing as a complete overall brand is to some people a waste of money, or they don't see it and it's quite hard. What's the struggles with that you're finding with convincing people of the ROI?
I think you're absolutely right. And, having worked in marketing and communications teams for some of the world's biggest brands, you still get that. There's hundreds of people that work in marketing and communications for JP Morgan, and yet you still need that education and buy-in from sales and products and services teams in order for them to obviously see the value in what you're looking to achieve and communicate on behalf of them. And I think from a personal brand perspective, I think it's rising in prevalence at the moment, and actually our mates ChatGPT and AI generated content at the moment is helping me because, I completed this survey a few weeks ago, but I recently attended a webinar by Daniel Priestley, who's another one that I would definitely recommend business owners listen to. I love him. He's very sales focused, which is why he's good for me because he's a bit more hard-nosed.
Create the waiting list.
Yeah, exactly. Create the waiting list, create an assessment, which is on my to-do list. But essentially, he talks about, how from an investment perspective, you really need to drive being a key person of influence, and actually in an AI content generating environment that we're all in right now. I see a lot of people that I meet at networking events very clearly using ChatGPT to create their content on social media. We all know that a robot has created that content. Yeah. And what we're seeing more and more is that search engines and, artificial intelligence search engines and social media are deprioritizing all of those pieces of content. So for me at the moment, creating authentic content on thought leadership, especially if you're ahead of the curve right now, before AI really does start to take over man versus machine argument, I would argue that is a core investment for your business. But I think with personal branding, one of the challenges that I face is that it is a longer cycle of investment. If you want to purely invest in socials and you're really driven by likes, followers, engagement metrics on the likes of LinkedIn, that's great. But actually, it's not about driving numbers. It's about having followers and connections that are invested in you, your value, and what you're bringing. So I would much rather have 5,000 followers, but with, 2 to 5% actually buying from me than 50,000 followers where none of them are actually engaging in anything you're sharing. So there's the articulation piece. And I guess one of my questions, if you don't mind me asking as we go, Matt, is, I have a lot of people that are very interested in personal brand and I've spent time with. I've been spending quite a lot of time creating quite bespoke proposals for said business owners, only for them to come away, like me share a proposal and them to come away and say, I want to think about this. I'm in the early stages of my business. It's quite a big investment, all of which obviously are very valid. Completely respect that as somebody that is starting their own business. But I think at the moment I need a bit more help around getting to yes, or not leaving the conversation until I've got a next tangible step in the sales cycle. So I wanted to ask you a bit about that in your experience, obviously as an entrepreneur and founder. But I realise that your business is quite different to mine in that you have sort of tangible elements to your business. It's not necessarily Matt Cox.
I suppose it is a service level.
Yeah.
So if you take not the lettings business, that's a bit more complicated, but the block management side of things, a lot of people think, well, what's there to do? Not really sure. So it can be a bit of a hard sell. And obviously, like anything, you can do your personal branding yourself. You can manage your block yourself or your lettings thing if you wanted to. So it's the perceived value of what that's going to create. So my job, if you like, if you take my business, is to perceive the time that it's going to get that person back. You're not dealing with the tenant at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's always the leaky toilet, but anyway.
Always.
The 2 o'clock in the morning leaky toilet. Even though I don't think I've
or
ever...
the washing
touch
machine.
wood, I've never had the washing machine or anything at 2 o'clock. Not mine anyway. Or if it has, they haven't told me till 8 o'clock. So
we like those tenants.
So the perceived value is that you're getting your time back in my scenario, and you're also not having to argue with your fellow neighbours if you're running the block yourself. The building surveying department, often it's party wall disputes or dealing with the contractor, stuff people don't like doing. They don't want to have the confrontation with the contractor where they say, oh, I didn't quote for that or whatever. They want to pay someone to do that. So that's the added value, I think, and you need to work out the added value, which we'll touch on in a minute. And then the other part of it, I think, is basically making sure that the person that you're quoting to isn't sort of, I wouldn't say messing you around, but they've got some intent and you're focusing on the right type of client. It strikes me that maybe sometimes the business owner you're talking to is probably too small to see the value in it, because it is a bit of a cost. Like, for instance, this we do completely for free. We give you the content, you can chop it up and do what you like with it. I give over a fair amount of time for doing all of this for personal branding for myself, because I recognise that there is a need for me to be my own person as much as I am like, in your Richard Branson example, I'm Mr. Charles Cox perhaps to some people, but I have other businesses, but I'm also Matt. And it's quite nice, although the orange sunglasses thing is a Charles Cox thing born, it's kind of become a Matt Cox enterprise thing as well. So we had people come up to us at a recent trade show and they wanted the glasses, and they'd heard about the podcast show and they wanted to see how they could come on it. And I was like, this is quite cool.
Yeah.
Because this stand is Charles Cox, but people are coming to talk to me as a different person, not just from that. So I see the value in it, but I'm not that kind of founder, starter, upper type person that maybe's got 2 members of staff and doesn't quite have the budget or see the value in it. So I would say figuring out your audience and making sure that you are targeting the right person. Like the Barrow, brilliant place and the rest of it, but the people in the room there tend to be, it can, because it's Brighton, it can be very freelancey.
Yeah.
And although some of the businesses in the room are quite big and probably do that, you've got to remember that some of those people might be towards the end of their career, so they might not want to do personal branding, or maybe they're extrovert and they don't want to do that. So you mentioned Paul Britton earlier. I know he does his own thing, but he would be like your perfect sized business and person to work with.
Yeah, he would.
And it's about identifying that sort of person. Whereas if you take Rebecca Bott, who does the castle rooms, the garden rooms, it's her and her husband and a team of builders. I'm not sure she would see the value in it because of the size of her business.
Yeah.
So she'd be a harder sell. I mean, she might love it. I don't know. She's not a big fan of social media, but I think it's the energy that goes into feeding it is what she's not a fan of. But yeah, I think that if you target the wrong person, and you need to work that out really quickly so you don't get these time vampires. So you spend a long time preparing your proposal, it's very neat, perfect, and then they go, thanks for that, I'll just put that in the maybe look at it next year pile when we're doing a bit better or a bit bigger. It's more expensive than I thought. So we had basic pricing structures and things like that from day one to not wean out those people, but like you get 10 inquiries from like a smaller client, and we would be like, these are our pricing matrix, you'll fit somewhere in here. If it's now still of interest to you, let me know and we'll deep dive further into it. You might want to consider doing something like that. So you say to your smaller person, I can do like I can get it up and running for you and then pass it back to you, or I can actually touch base with you once a week or once a month or whatever. And here's a kind of bronze, silver, gold package, because you simplified that rather than being like a really bespoke thing. And then when you've got the more serious person who's like actually like, say like someone like myself, I'm like, right, me and Luke, we're doing a really good job here, but we want now somebody externally, because we're not ready to employ a second person for Luke, but we want someone to come in and maybe just steer us in the right direction. You can be like, that's a really good bona fide lead because I can see what they've already got, or they've got the passion to do that.
Yeah.
And you need to be able to separate those two things out fairly quickly so you don't end up spending too much time doing proposals for people that probably the conversion rate is very low. You want to be spending your time on the ones where the conversion rate is more likely to be higher. Yeah,
I think there's definitely I definitely hear what you're saying, and I think that is something that's quite important. Like initially in the first couple of months, I think every small business owner is so concerned about making any money.
Yes,
they're kind of saying yes to everything. Yeah, exactly. And I was very guilty of doing that, and then I sat down and had. I gave myself a proper strategy session and went through it, and that's how I identified the personas. But each of those audience personas that I mentioned earlier in the podcast, all of them have ambitions to grow and to scale. Yeah. And I think to your point, unless somebody is in that phase of growth, that they're probably not the right client to invest in their personal brand, or they need purely a social media marketing manager, which isn't what I deliver. Yeah. Because social media to me is only one facet of the mix. You need to be public speaking. You should create your own podcast, and you and Luke should know, if you don't know already, people need to engage with at least 2 to 7 hours of your content before they really feel that they have an affinity to you. Yeah. So you and Luke, with the podcast you're creating here, you probably got to at least your 7 or 8 hours of podcast material when people were coming up to you at the business show and were like, do you know what, Matt? I actually would love to go on your podcast. Yeah. And long may that continue, because the more content you create and the more you feed the search engines, the more your personal brand will grow.
Exactly that. I think you just need somebody, the target for you, the perfect avatar customer is the person that understands that. Like for me, if I was a person that said, right, I'm going to invest in this podcast studio, I'm going to do all this, we're going to employ Luke, he's going to do this, all that kind of stuff, and I'm chasing likes and followers and stuff constantly, going, oh, it's not enough or whatever. Yeah. Or I just think that it's, I'm doing it because we need a more social media presence or something like that, or there's no return on it, we're not monetized, we're not doing that. Those are all the wrong things for people to do, and I think you need to be able to identify that quite quickly to make sure that you've got those customers that you're actually going to get a bona fide lead from. Yeah. So I would say slightly bigger businesses are the ones to go for. Business owners that are a little bit extrovert, obviously you've got to do something, haven't you? And you're going to be reliant upon them feeding you content and so on. And even being in a room like somewhere like the Barrow, for instance, I know we're picking on that because obviously
that's where we met, everyone. It's not just our favourite one.
There are plenty of other networking events similar to that, but you'll find even in that room there'll be a massive mixture of people like yourself who are one-man band startup type businesses, or maybe in a year or two's trading, versus somebody's business that's expanded massively over a 3-year period, or somebody that's been doing it for 25 years and maybe is looking more for an exit strategy. And you need to just kind of sniff out quite exactly who it is that you're kind of targeting, really. But don't write off the other ones, because some of them will be like, this is what I really want to do and I think it's going to help. You just need to be able to have a very quick kind of go-to pricing structure or like a tender document for them. And I would suggest you to adopt something. I'm a big fan of like gold, silver, bronze type models for those things, where you can just say, look, here's the base packages for what I believe will suit you. I can do you something bespoke if you want me to, but have a look at that, and then that gives you a good flavour of it. Because 99% of the time, people just want to know how much it's going to cost.
I know.
And that's the client that you kind of probably don't want, because they're looking at it and going, it's going to cost me £1,000 a month. What am I going to get back for it? Because I could put £1,000 a month into Google Ads and probably it might generate business. I'm not talking about my business when I'm doing my own branding. I'm talking about myself, but I'm not generating any money. You know, that's the kind of person you're like, you either need educating or you're not ready for this type of service.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Yeah. That's good advice. Thank you. Some of it has been shared with me already.
Yeah.
But no, that is really helpful, because I'm going through a process at the moment where I've got a lot of proposals out there. And I'm hoping some of them come back with a yes now.
Yeah. I would be looking at your kind of businesses that have probably got less than 50 employees, but more than 20, 25. Still run-ish by the owner, but the owner's maybe not really involved so much
in
anymore.
The day-to-day,
A bit kind of like Britain and Time, our business as well. Those kind of size businesses where you can come in and say to the owner, look, you know, it's good for people to still remember you, because we suffer as I grew, and then people would say to me like, oh, we don't see you so much anymore, or whatever. So if they then can follow me and see other things, and they still maintain that connection for your kind of legacy clients. So, you know, that's a good selling point, because a lot of our clients did say, well, we never see you anymore, Matt. You know, now Susan looks after us, and you know, occasionally we see you in Sainsbury's or something. And I'm like, well, actually, I'm doing other things. Like, my job is to grow the business. You explain that to them, but you can actually go see what I'm doing if you like on YouTube, or follow us on the social media. I'm always on all that kind of stuff. If you want a little bit of a Matt fix, so to speak.
Oh, I love that. If you need a Matt fix, go to YouTube. That's a good quote for the day, I reckon.
So I think that stuff is key to you, making sure you're not wasting your time on those things. Cause you can. I mean, we did that a lot in the early days when it was just me on my own, or maybe a couple of staff, and we would quote for everything, and we present it in a nice little pack, and all the rest of it go off, and it would just be a complete waste of time. Yeah. And they didn't sat on it. Occasionally they come back like 3 years later and say, can you still, you know.
Well, it's also your IP, right? You know, in this scenario, when I've met a small business owner recently who I would love to manage his personal brand. I've been quite overt about telling him that, and we've spent time together looking at what that looks like, and I've shared a proposal with him. He isn't ready just yet, but we're hoping to work together going forwards. And I saw him at an event last week, and I said, sorry, we haven't managed to chat. Be great to catch up soon. We have a coffee. You know, again, just sort of trying to keep the connection and keep that established connection. And I was like, I've had lots of ideas. I've been writing them down. He was like, I'm looking forward to hearing them. And I kind of said, well, maybe. Because, you know, I can keep giving you ideas and you'll just go and use them. I'm not going to give you all of my IP. So it's getting the balance of the dangled carrot, but not sharing too much too. Yeah. So, I mean, I go into default like helping to solve a problem. And then I have to remember that actually me helping to solve a problem is what I'm trying to charge for now.
Yeah, it's creating you a problem because
Yeah.
you haven't got money in your till.
Exactly. I need some money in the cash tin.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly, yeah. So you put down here also balancing quality and scale. I think we've kind of covered that with the staffing scenario, so I don't know if there was any other kind of questions around that.
No, actually not. I think I think your insights around that have been very helpful. Because I'm definitely starting to experience that even with the freelancers that I work with. I really like and trust them, but ultimately they're not invested in my business.
Yeah.
So when I ask for something by a certain deadline, you know, I can be quite explicit and share it, or I'm the one that has to like chase it up and follow it up. So I'm kind of like, look, I am paying you an hourly rate still, and I either need this for myself or for my client. I don't want to now have to like remember every time to follow up with you. And I think that's probably like the JP Morgan Experian Reckitt Benckiser in me that I'm like, you know, I just kind of need stuff like quicker than that. I am really looking forward to having a member of my own team. So hopefully once some of those yeses convert to the cash tin, that will be the next step. Exactly.
And make sure you've got those that KPIs so you can be like, right, I need so many yeses before I can do that. And the thing I need most is XYZ. Do I need a bookkeeper? Do I need some admin support? What is it you need? Like if you figure that out, you're not then arriving at that decision when you've got those yeses or those conversions.
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. And then cutting through the noise and building a business that stands out. Obviously, there aren't loads of people doing what you do, but I think what you do is different to a social media manager or a website person. And I think it's very easy for naive people to assume that it's all rolled up into marketing of some nature. And therefore, standing out from that crowd, I think, is probably your key USP, if you like, that you're not doing websites or necessarily Facebook posts all the time or whatever it might be, you know, static stuff.
Yeah, I think that is the key thing, and I think I actually wrote the responses to your questionnaire a few weeks ago, and that's definitely something that I've been trying to lean into a little bit more. You know, I have, and Luke and I were talking about this right at the beginning. You know, I have over 15 years of experience working with senior leaders from across some incredible brands and spending real quality time with them, understanding, you know, their leadership skills and qualities, their family life, like how they manage to deliver what they deliver, you know, what pressures they're under as leaders of these organizations and how they need to articulate their own commercialization and business modules and strategies, both internally and externally. And I have helped and supported them with that visibility. And I think when you're buying into me and you buy into Beyond & Co, you're buying not only a strategy for yourself or your business, but you're buying the experience that I have had supporting leaders with incredible experiences to become more visible and more commercial in terms of like how they position themselves. So you're right, like the tactics and the execution is one part, and absolutely I can save clients time by working with trusted partners or engaging them with the right partner. You know, I don't use the same videographer, for example, for every client. I don't use the same photographer for every client. People have different budgets. People like working with different people. People might get more out of one photographer over another. And I will partner probably more and more with certain, you know, tactical deliveries so that I have some autonomy and creativity around some of those partnerships. But ultimately, you're buying the strategy and the support in deploying that, whether that is a time save, a commercialization, and or obviously the execution of that through partnerships. So hopefully, if I continue to articulate it well, people will have more clarity around what it is that I do and how I do it. So it's just sharing that message so that, to your point, people don't just think like, you know, brand is the same as marketing, that web design is the same as, you know, digital online presence. And because I can do a little bit of everything, I'm a bit of a jack of all trades, but I can see how it all comes together to deliver the right tactics for you and your business as opposed to just one thing or another.
Yeah, there's so much more to it than just digital marketing nowadays. But yeah, I think if you can make sure that you stand out in that sense, then that will do you proud. Because you go to any networking event and there's always somebody that says, "Hi, my name's Dave, and I can look after your social media. Now, have a look at when your last news feed was, and if it was from 5 years ago, you need me." And then they sit down or whatever. That market's like impossibly hard to get into if you're a freelancey type person. But I think this market is different to that, so you need to make sure that you make that clear, scream and shout about it or whatever.
Yeah.
So
I will try to scream and shout. Sounds good to me.
Good stuff. Right, so you have got a list of questions or some other questions maybe here for me.
So not so much questions now,
or other
actually.
Things you might want to ask or talk about.
Yeah, so I think quite a lot of them we've actually covered off in our conversation, so that's great. So thank you so much. One of the things that I did want to articulate was some of the quick things that you can do as a business owner or member of a business that will help you to drive your visibility. Okay. And really the visibility side of things is the key thing. You know, so many...
So this is a kind of 5 key tips for the audience in terms of if they need some takeaways a little bit.
Exactly. I don't have 5.
Or whatever.
I have 3 and then a bonus one, so I have 4.
Three and a bonus, everybody. So we're going to get some tips here for your brand presence and various things. 3 tips and a bonus. So
3 tips and a bonus. So I get asked a lot about things that you can do as a business owner to drive your visibility quickly. Obviously, the people that work with me hopefully will be wanting to invest, their thought leadership and my time into generating that for them. But some of the key things that you can do are updating your headline on LinkedIn. So some people may know this already, but I see so many people basically use it as a space to add their job title. But if you're thinking more broadly and more strategically about who you are, what you do and what you want to achieve going forwards as a future state, I really try to share with people that you should be looking at the problem that you're solving as opposed to what your existing job title is. So for me, mine is helping leaders grow influence and visibility. Whereas if I wrote, I'm a personal brand advisor, you might be like, I'm not really sure what that is. I see a lot of it in technology and finance where people basically use the technical lingo and people are just completely lost. Like what is a CRM project lead or a UHNW relationship manager? Well, actually, I help and support ultra high net worth individuals and their family offices to drive and grow their investments. That's a big one.
So what would you do if it was me? So on my one, I know exactly what's on mine. It just says something like entrepreneur, and then I've got the
like a line,
and then it's like business owner, property investor.
Yeah.
Dad to 3 kids, whatever it's. I can't remember exactly what the list is, but that's what my one says.
Your one's probably a little bit more muddied because you have a few different roles and a few different hats. So I'd probably need to spend a bit more time thinking about it. But I would definitely be leading with what problem you help to solve.
Yeah.
So is it that you want to lean in more to like the property management side of things or your investment side of things? You're generating revenue or generating growth for those people that you look after or the businesses that you help to look after. And then, passionate about enterprise and supporting founders and business leaders to share their vision.
So it would be something like, off the top of my head, would be... assisting business owners and assisting people's assets, I suppose. Because what we're primarily doing is I'm doing this stuff, personal branding stuff, and then the main business is basically making sure people's assets, property, essentially, is well maintained and looked after or developed or maximised for a good return for them, really, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
So it would be something along that. We don't have to freestyle it now, but it would be something along those lines.
I would be leading with the fact that you are like an investment grower or revenue driver. Yeah. Everybody loves commerciality. Mm-hmm. So I would be leading with that. And I would actually try not to use words like assist.
Yeah.
Because it diminishes your role and your thought leadership as a person that actually is generating the strategies to guide where people are investing their personal and business money.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's what I would look at. In your about section, so your about section, again, lots of people just basically do, in my day-to-day role, I do this.
Yeah.
Boring, like no one cares actually what you're doing. Well, obviously in this scenario, like we're interrogating it and we're thinking about like how you structure it and if there's efficiencies. But when someone's looking at your LinkedIn, no one really cares what you're currently doing. What they want to know is like why they should know you. Like what value are you going to deliver to the person that's reading your current LinkedIn profile? So I would think about this in real, like dreaming big and demonstrating what you're doing now, how what you're doing now is filtering into that final state. It's also really good search fodder to add keywords to this section. So when you're kind of drafting your paragraphs and summarizing exactly what you stand for, what you do, where you want to be in the future, think about, the types of roles that you might like in the future, what that entails, what skills you have that could demonstrate the fact that you are capable of those roles. I recently helped an executive that I'd previously worked with to update her LinkedIn because she was worried about redundancy. And we basically listed out all of her core skills within the about section so that when somebody looks up, revenue driving relationship manager or words to that effect, they're all in those search terms in that about section at the front of her profile. The other thing that I think very little people do, unless you work in the marketing space, is pinning projects or posts that you're particularly proud of. So one of the things that I do as a small business owner is I've got kind of like how we work from a personal brand perspective, how we work from a business brand perspective, and meet the founder, like meet me, as my pinned content at the top of my Instagram page and also on my LinkedIn. But I also, with my LinkedIn, will pinpoint projects that I've worked with in the past at JP Morgan, Experian, that I'm particularly proud of, because that's my credibility. That's your reference point before you begin to work with me. And I think a lot of people don't invest the time to think about what's at the top of their feed, and all too many times people are basically like, oh, it was great to attend this event this week and catch up with da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Really, all that that's serving, the only people that that's serving is you, the event, and the people that are in the pictures with you. As opposed to like, oh, I really want to work with Matt because I saw that he'd been working on this. Or I recently listened to a podcast that Matt hosted. I can't remember the lady's name, but you were talking about kind of social housing and the prosperity of social housing and how you think about your portfolio from a property perspective. That's it, yeah, in order to assist underserved communities and what homelessness is. Ding, 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 like all of those things for you and for Jamie are like big hot topics right now. And actually, if you're leaning into that from a messaging standpoint, that should be something that you focus your, attention to at the top of your profile. And then my last kind of plug, and they are all quite LinkedIn focused because, as I mentioned before, they're easy.
Personal
quick
branding doesn't work so much on the Facebooky things.
I need to obviously help to support you if you have a speaking opportunity or you want to be a TED speaker. But the fourth one is that statistics show that, and LinkedIn data shows us this, that leaders that post at least once a week have twice the amount of engagement and build brand equity faster than leaders that don't post at all or that are inconsistent with their posting. So if anybody's kind of new to posting on LinkedIn, I always advise that you post at least twice a week and you create something that is valuable for your audience as one of those posts. And then the second post should be about something that you're either passionate about or something that's personal to you, so that you're really trying to build up that credibility and trust with your audience over a period of time. So they're my 4 hot tips.
Your 3 plus a bonus.
3 plus a bonus. Next time I'll bring 5 because Matt obviously thinks in 5s.
I think in 5s. Well, I've got a 5th. Well,
go on. Please do.
It might be a 5th. You might poo-poo it.
Oh no.
You're the LinkedIn queen. I think it's really good so there's a tool on there where you can ask for recommendations.
Yeah.
And it's a bit like, I suppose, a review of you as a person as opposed to like the business you work for or whatever.
Yeah.
People don't tend to do that. You just send somebody else on LinkedIn a recommendation ask. You just say, this person worked with you. It might be a colleague. It might be a client. It could be anything. You can tick lots of different boxes and they can write a nice little thing on you saying, yeah, I worked with this person. They were really efficient, post that. Or, yeah, I worked with their firm, that sort of thing. I just think that when I'm looking and I want to use somebody and generally not just be a friend with them or a connection or whatever it's called on LinkedIn, I will read that stuff because I just think it's really important.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think like it's a great fifth tip because it is really underestimated, the power of those recommendations, and really underutilised. So for example, at JP Morgan, you're not able to give recommendations externally for the employees that have worked there. So literally, like, I've worked there for nearly 9 years. I've worked on some fantastic projects with some fantastic people. And until they leave JP Morgan, they can't outwardly advocate for me. So when I was creating my website, I couldn't have them as testimonials, etc., etc. But I have utilised them as they've exited with these recommendations on LinkedIn. And the only other thing that I would say is you can be quite influential and persuasive in how you ask for a recommendation. So, for example, when I was setting up my website and I knew that I didn't necessarily have client case studies yet, which obviously incredibly powerful, especially when it's so intrinsically linked to you as a person providing the service, I basically went to different colleagues, stakeholders, clients that I'd worked with in the past to build out that range of audience personas. Yeah. So I made sure I had, a friend that I used to work with at Reckitt Benckiser that now works in venture capital, and he's really happy for me to quote him as a testimonial. And he's talked about my commercial savviness because he used to work in a go-to-market sales role for Reckitt. Then I had another guy who talks about my attention to detail and how I really promoted his visibility. And I've got executives that have been incredibly shy in the past and haven't wanted to take the stage. And I really sort those people out because that's not just about personal brand marketing and communications. That's kind of executive coaching and visibility. So I was very strategic about who I asked for a recommendation and how I asked them. And my other kind of tip to round out the fifth one would be that when you ask for a recommendation, you give that leader, especially if they're incredibly senior and time poor, a bit of a lead as to what you want them to recommend you for. So I've got hi, Matt, I've received some really great testimonials from some of our previous colleagues, but none of them have talked about X project, or none of them have yet talked about, how we drove attendance utilising your personal brand by over 28%. Can you talk about that when you share your testimonial? Because a lot of the time, it's 360 reviews at the end of the year. You're like, yeah, Matt's great. He's great at his job. Or Luke's done this, that, and the other, if you're closer to what Luke's been doing from a content perspective. But you might not remember the metric or the bit that's actually going to make that recommendation stand out. So it could be perceived as being a bit leading. I would say that it's maybe influencing the outcome you desire to be a bit more specific.
And also to some degree you're assisting those people, and I think that the person that understands that as well.
They're not going to say yes.
As a time-hungry person, if someone writes to me and says, "Can you do this?" and they've pretty much typed out kind of what you want them to say, but you can't copy and paste it. Then that's incredibly useful, because ultimately if you don't want to do it, you don't do it.
Exactly. So, you don't want your name against someone that you think isn't good at their job or hasn't delivered a great project. But to your point, you're just helping them to be a bit more efficient in providing the recommendation.
Super. Right. Well, I think if that's, unless there's any other tips, no sixth one.
No sixth tip, but I do have a present for you, because we talked about this off mic, but you obviously have become very synonymous with the orange sunglasses.
I believe that is true, yes.
And the Matthew Cox branding. So I thought that it wouldn't be right, as somebody that specialises in personal brand and marketing and communications, not to bring you a gift, to say thank you for having me on.
Well, that's very kind of you.
Here's a present, Matt,
Thank
for you and the team.
Much.
can by all means open it now.
Have a little look and what is in here.
There's also a card. I'm very big on card writing.
Okay, I'll do the card in a minute.
Yeah, I was going to say, you don't have to do it like my son and open it first.
Harder to show on... it's in the bottom here. Bear with everybody. It's in some very nice gold wrapper.
I help you.
Pop that down there. Oh, it is a little plaque with a live on air bit, and then
that's so nice.
we have a little slogans on the back here, because good energy is best shared on air. Thanks so much for having us, from Teri. Oh, that is very nice. I think that can go definitely over here in the background now.
I'd love to see it in your future podcast, Matt, but that wasn't why it was created. I just thought it was quite fun.
We can at least have it in here for the moment, so we can have it like that, even with a pair of orange.
Oh yeah, have we got to do our obligatory photo?
We'll do that in a minute for Luke and his thumbnail, but we'll put that there so that they can be together.
Fabulous.
The merch store.
The merch store, exactly.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. That is really nice of you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes. No problem. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Be good to have you on again in about a year's time. See where you're going.
I would love that.
Yeah, and then you can have a new list of questions.
Sounds good to me.
Brilliant. All right. Well, I'll see you soon.
Thanks, Matt.
Take care.